Hello, this is Tallie Consortium Services and the right-hand persons. It is Friday, August 31st, 2018. Now, I'm here to discuss Tallie hypothesis and the right-hand persons. Now, this is most definitely regarding the African-American criminal culture in Dallas, Texas. Now, I started on a journey to really just do a simple crime seminar, probably with a 50, 100 people is what I was expecting at the most. I've been getting a lot of threats from other criminals or former criminals in the community. I've been getting threats from other families, politicians, etc. So it's been a big mess. I've been going to training in my profession in some capacity for over 20 years. And I pretty much have a good idea of, of how we've trained in the past. I'm a licensed chemical dependency counselor on a master level. I have a master's degree in professional counseling. So once again, I have to, in my profession, there's a lot of assessing and diagnosing. So I most definitely believe there needed to be an update on the African American criminal culture. Just having a quick seminar for professionals, other professionals. I'm not on probation. And most definitely it is my right as the First Amendment, and it's my right as a counselor to be able to, communicate my knowledge to others. Now, once again, this is Tallie hypothesis, part B, 3B, before I get to part 4. Now, I mentioned some things in part 3. I had a lot of corrections. Part 3 was supposed to be corrections. Now, I watched some more videos, and I thought about a lot of other things. Now, once again, I started off with all drugs were once legal in America. All drugs were once legal in America. But let's talk about the colonization of America. I want to go back to the Roman Empire. Let me look at my notes so I can be more factual. Let's look at the Roman Empire. Just a second. Now, the Roman Empire is pretty much modern day modern day Spain, Italy. Let's look at Britain, Jerusalem, Egypt, Syria, France, Istanbul, Turkey, Armenia, Arabia, parts of Africa, and other parts of Asia. Then you got Greece. So that's the old Roman Empire. And you also have Switzerland in there. So that's the old Roman Empire. Now, in the late 1400s, Spain sent out what we call Spanish conquistadors. They was to sell the world and, find other lands or whatever. So they pretty much, Christopher Columbus was one of the Spanish conquistadors. He's actually Italian. So they discovered the entire Caribbean island, and their goal was to successfully colonize and build the entire Caribbean islands. You got Cuba, you have even the Bahamas, you have Jamaica, you have Haiti, you have they conquered majority of South America. They conquered Peru, Bolivia, Colombia. Now, Portugal mostly got Brazil. Portugal is right next to Spain. Okay, so you had the Portuguese and you had the Spanish conquistadors. Now, once again, Christopher Columbus founded all those Caribbean islands. And what they did, there was different forms of Indian tribes. In some areas, they wiped out the Indians and they brought in African slaves to rebuild, to build the land. Now they also founded Central America. Now Central America, from on up from Nicaragua on up to what we call modern day Mexico. It was the really in Central America, Mexico, what we call modern day Mexico today. There was the Aztec Indians. Now their voyage was a little bit different when they got to the Aztecs. They tried to make peace, of course, and so half of North America, from Texas, all of West, the entire West Coast, parts of the Midwest, parts of Mississippi, Alabama, was pretty much colonized by the Spanish conquistadors, or the Spanish conquerors. The whole half of North America was colonized by the Spanish. Okay, so once again, Italy and Spain, all these, France, Greece, Switzerland, parts of Britain, Arabia, Jerusalem, Egypt, all is part of the old Roman Empire. Now the British, Dutch, and Netherlands pretty much conquered the 13 colonies, which consists of cities like New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia, etc. So when they come to South America, they discover cocoa leaves. The Indians are eating cocoa leaves, so they start feeding the Africans cocoa leaves. Now, as I mentioned in part 3, all drugs were once legal. All drugs was once legal in the United States. Now, during this time period, we talking about the 1400s, the 1500s, 1600s. Slavery is going on. You don't have Border Patrol. You don't have FBI, DEA. People are bringing in, their goods. They're bringing in their home remedies. So everything is coming to America. Drugs is legal. I think around 1820, Mexico, which is a very key point, gets their freedom from Spain. They get their freedom from Spain in 1820. So the state of Texas, which I'm from, Dallas, Texas, it was go a little independent for a minute. So while they going independent, the Irish, the Scottish, the Swiss, the Germans, or whatever, are looking for cheap land. Okay, they're looking for cheap land, according to Wikipedia. Okay, and I know they say we shouldn't use that as a reference, but I am. Okay, so they're looking for cheap land in Texas. Now the Spanish brought horses to America. The Spaniards started ranching in Texas. They brought in their horses. Then once again, they colonizing. They brought in cows. They got pigs and goats, etc. That's their way of making money. So once again, Mexico get their freedom from Spain in 1820. But the Swiss and Scottish, the Irish are coming to Texas, but they're bringing slaves with them to Texas when they come. Mexico doesn't agree with that. They don't believe in slavery. They just got their freedom from Spain. They ended slavery in their state. During this time, I need to back up. I forgot. I think it was 1787 that the United States was formed. Okay, so you got the. I need to back up. So the George Washington isn't president anymore in 1820, but the United States has been formed. So they come because once again Spain had the whole West Midwest, and half of the South. Now the French is also coming in. So they have part of New Orleans and some other states. And the French and Spain are going back and forth in Haiti. Now, I think Haiti is going to gain their freedom, and they're going to wipe out all the Spanish or whites in their country. They're going to killing spree. They wipe them all out, and that's sort of why one of the main reasons Haitians, it's predominantly black or African, but that's one of the reasons, the country went sort of poor. They wiped out all the whites, the Spanish descent, etc. And once again, all those islands, South America, Mexico, the Caribbean, all have Spanish descent. Okay, so it all goes back to Spain, and it all goes back to Italy. It all goes back to the Roman Empire. I'm trying to explain this the best way that I can. Okay, so once again, I better read my notes. 1820, the Spanish Mexico gained its independence, and you have the Irish. They're looking for cheap land, so they come to Texas. They're already ranching in Texas. They already, that's what the Spaniards created. The Spaniards created really the cowboy hat. Even though the Stetson, Mr. Stetson created, he's from Philadelphia, he created the cowboy hat that we wear today. He created it in 1865. But the Spaniards, they have the cowboy hat. They ride the horses. They bring horses to North America. They pretty much colonizing their part a little bit different than the British and Netherlands. Chitlins, what we eat and what we call soul food is really from British. That's what the British peasants used to eat chitlins. And of course, they gave it to the slaves when they got to America. Texas, they bring it in. The Irish is, they find their land. They come into Texas. So they, they come in and they fit to start ranching. But what happens is that the Irish and the Scottish and whoever else was coming were bringing slaves. So Texas and Mexico go to war. Mexico opposes slavery. They have already ended slavery. Okay? So Texas is going to, I think the first battle, Texas got whooped. Pretty much. But then Texas is going to seek assistance from the newly founded United States. Okay? So we have the Texas-Alamo War. And, of course, Texas win, and we pretty much get we get California, we get all those states, but Texas ended up becoming a Confederate state. Now let me move up a little bit. Let me look at my notes. I'm just going to read them verbatim. Now I also watch Our Prophet. As I told you in part 3 about the Irish Mafia. There was an Irish Mafia. I told you in part 3 that the Italians and Irish, and that battle really took place in New Orleans. I think an Irish officer got murdered by an Italian, and the Italian got off. And so what ended up happening is that the Irish end up lynching some Italians. So that was a major conflict right there. But why did the Italians come to America in the first place? Is because I forgot his name, but he was newly elected in Italy. And a couple of mobsters, they just left Italy and came to America and started the mafia. And we actually had the Italian Mafia in Dallas, Texas. Now you have Jimmy Hoffa. Let me make sure that's his name. I don't want to be incorrect because I'm putting all this stuff together at the last minute, and I want to make sure that I'm correct because I have a little bit more time. Okay, Jimmy Hoffa. Okay, he was the considered the American Labor Union leader, mostly in the Midwest, but he also was considered a Irish mafia, and he supposedly was kidnapped in 1975 and murdered. And that's a very, the 70s is a very important time period. So we're looking at once again, Texas and Alamo, they lose the war. Mexico lose the war, and that's why we have the states that we have. Texas eventually become a Confederate state for about 4 or 5 years, and during the slavery period, the Texas slaves had another location to escape to besides the Detroit area or the north. They were able to escape to Mexico. So they was able to escape to Mexico because, once again, Mexico did not agree with slavery. Now, there's an Afro-Mexican population in Mexico as well. So what I want to get into, because I'm trying to work my way up to the other side of Iran-Contra. Now, and once again, let me go back to drugs being legal in America. Once again, I mentioned in part 3, all drugs were once legal in America. All drugs. I think the only system that we really had was when America was founded was U.S. Customs, and that's a correction. Now, we didn't have the FBI, we didn't have ATF, we didn't have the DEA. So when people were coming to America, they pretty much was bringing anything they pretty much wanted. Now, once again, we had the cocoa leaves is all over South America. They just showing cocoa leaves. And as I mentioned in part 3, the Chinese immigrants bring opium with them when they come to America. The Chinese immigrants. Now you have the Golden Crescent, which is, if I'm not mistaken, Afghanistan, Turkey, and Pakistan, which is all connected to Iran. And then you have the Golden Triangle, which is Thailand, Burma, and Laos. Now, Laos was once owned by the French, and Burma was once part of India. Now, if you don't know the history of opium, I know in our Prophet video, he talks about the French connection. Now, Laos is part of the Golden Crescent. Golden Triangle. I don't want to say the French connection anymore because I'm looking at the Roman Empire. You got, once again, the Roman Empire. You got the Italians and you got Spain. So I'm just saying all of them are connected. But Laos was conquered by the French. So they most definitely had access to opium. But all of those countries that I mentioned are also connected to China. Now, there was something called the British-India War. The British-India or the British-China War. So pretty much, it's called the British-India Company. They pretty much shoved opium into China. They used to have opium dens, etc. They used to have opium dens. And once again, the Chinese immigrants brought them to America when they came. Now, in the Golden Triangle, They say it's Chinese Muslims and Chinese non-Muslims that are pretty much in that area. And then once again, you have the Golden Crescent. I know for sure Pakistan and Afghanistan is part of the Golden Crescent, and they're next to Iran. Okay, now whether the Italians in Detroit got their drugs from the French Connection, but I'm just saying pretty much the Italians run everything. You know, they have to be. They conquered all these islands, and Pablo Escobar, yes, he's for Colombia, but he's Spanish. He's a Spaniard. He's Spanish. His ancestry is from Spain. Just like my ancestry goes way back to Africa, his ancestry goes way back to Spain. And if you look at the routes, that they took, they went to I forgot. Spain also conquered Florida. Okay, so they conquered Florida also. So if you look at the routes that they coming into America, they taking the same routes that the Spanish conquerors took when they colonized America. Okay, so once again, the Chinese immigrants brought opium to America. I'm gonna come back to that. All right, so you had morphine. People were using morphine. They was injecting morphine into their veins. The hypodermic needle was created in 1853 by the Germans. Now, once again, I mentioned cocoa leaves. Cocaine was really created by the Germans. Amphetamines were created by the Germans. So we're looking at cocaine. Eventually, everybody will learn how to create cocaine. But I mentioned patent medicine. So in America, especially after the 1850s, we have what we call patent medicines. I mentioned it. Now I mentioned in part 3 that they had heroin in water, cocaine in water. But you had heroin and alcohol. You had cocaine and alcohol. You had it in your teas. Heroin was really a cough suppressant, a cough syrup for children. They was giving it heroin. They pretty much was giving children heroin. America and the country, in the world as a whole, was was young as how drugs have an effect on the mind and body. Now in 1915, the Harrison Act was passed. A whole bunch of individuals had overdosed on narcotics. But let me back up to Dallas. Dallas, Texas itself had if I'm not mistaken, Dallas and New Orleans and Ohio. They had a major drug epidemic, and right here in Dallas, Texas, we had a lot of people that were dying, that had died due to those patent medicines or using morphine, heroin, and cocaine, patent medicines, etc. And once again, as heroin was also an antidote for morphine addiction. Heroin is actually derived from morphine. It's created from morphine. They died. A whole bunch of people died. And at that time, Texas had passed a lot of laws. Because Dallas was actually created between 1841 and 1845 by John Neely Bryan, who was a lawyer and an Indian trader. So he was a lawyer and an Indian trader. So that's pretty much, we're colonizing. America's young, and we have. So that was the first epidemic for Dallas, Texas. Now during that time period, now there's a rumor. I don't know how true this is. During that time period, supposedly a black chemist created crack cocaine. I will discuss that a little bit more when I get into the big secret. If it's true that a black chemist from Dallas, Texas created crack cocaine, that was actually already here. But once again, Dallas, Texas as a whole, after that incident, passed strict laws on drug use. Now in 1915, the Harrison Act was passed. It outlawed pretty much cocaine leaves, cocoa leaves, and opium. And whether they was in Coca-Cola products, etc., they outlawed it. And we know cocaine today is a Schedule II drug. That means it has a pharmacological effect as an anesthetic. So that means it does have some medical use. But we know heroin is Schedule I. Is outlawed. We know morphine is also outlawed. And we know morphine and opium and narcotics are also pain relievers. They're cough suppressants like codeine and heroin, and they're also anti-diarrhea. That's why you have the effects that you have when you're in withdrawal from narcotics. Now, let me get back to, now as I mentioned in part 3, the Irish. I forgot to mention, the Italians don't like the new, I forgot what that, I don't know if he's the president of Italy or whatever, no offense, whatever he is supposed to be, and a lot of mobsters come to America. Okay, they get into, they have one dispute with the Irish. Okay, so this has pretty much been an ongoing battle. And if you watch the Irish Mob on Netflix and you watch Inside the Mafia, which talks about the Italians, you would know that, especially in New York, that they had some conflict with each other. Okay, the Irish is selling cocaine, but what I'm saying, the Italians is getting paid regardless. They have to. Now, unless they got, I have to really, one thing I failed to do is look at Portugal. The Portuguese discovered Brazil. Now, I don't know if they discovered Peru, but I know for sure that Spain conquered Colombia. So, once again, all of that is all Spanish, Italian ancestry. Okay, so even though the Irish, in the Irish mob, it says that the Irish are selling cocaine, but what I'm saying, the Italians have had to already be in the business. Now they say the German soldiers use, of course, we know in any war you're going to have some type of upper to probably help you keep going. And they say the German soldiers had amphetamines. Once again, they created cocaine. So the German soldiers, so Germany had the upper hand in the beginning. But once again, the Italians and Spain is all over the world, okay? The whole Caribbean islands, South America and parts of North America. So when I get to the big secret, most definitely I will discuss that a little bit more. Now, let me get into a little bit data before I get back to the other side of Iran-Contra firm. Now, I want to also bring up once again Jimmy Hoffa. He was a American labor union leader, mostly in the Midwest. He's supposedly was also the part of the Irish Mafia. And when I watched Irish Mob on Netflix, once again, they're bringing in cocaine from Canada into America. And you know, our prophet does in American Dope does discuss Jimmy Hoffa. So I watched parts of that, but my memory is bad right now. But you know, he has pretty much control of that area. You know, so they're bringing in, you know, so they got that little Canada border there. And once again, you know, they say Detroit had, you know, if you look at Motown Mafia, you know, a lot of African American stars was using cocaine, you know, in the late 60s, and some say as early as at the 50s. Cocaine was here; it was created. You know, I think we know the FBI was created early. I think the CIA was created in 1947. Now they say the CIA is mostly comprised of the Irish. You know, if you they say to go to another early on. I'm not saying now, but early on, you know, you had to be Irish. So the CIA is predominantly Irish. There has never been an Italian president. Most presidents either have Irish descent, English, Scottish, Welsh. Because once again, it goes all the way back to the colonization of this land. So we get into the close to the Iran. Once again, Jimmy Hoffa would disappear in 1975, and I'm gonna bring that up in a big secret because it's making my big secret become more reality. Now I'm gonna look at some of my notes that I have. Now I mentioned I probably have offended some people. You know, I said I'm gonna go over this verbatim. Okay, this is what I have. Even President Nixon, President Jimmy Carter is Welsh Irish. President Ronald Reagan is Irish. President George H.W. Bush and President George W. Bush is English, German, Irish. CIA Director William Casey was Irish. Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North was Irish. Secretary of State Podesta, I didn't get clarity, but I'm assuming he's Irish. I don't want to say he is. Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy was Irish, and most CIA were Irish. Okay, so once again, it's going back to the colonization of the United States. Okay, so we look at the Roman Empire. Is another, you know, before I get to that, so was all these presidents part of the Irish Mafia? Now I want to go back to Nixon, who's also Irish. Now they say John Kennedy was Irish. Now we know John Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. Now we also had the Italian Mafia set in Dallas, the Italian Mafia in Dallas, Texas. Okay, specifically in Dallas, Texas. So you know, they say that the Irish Mafia died away in Dallas, Texas in the 1970s. You know, we have other groups. You have the Irish mobs, the Irish gangsters. You have, I'm sorry. We're talking about the Italians. You know, the Italians are here. You know, it might not be factual, but, you know, if you look at the populations, you know, I don't think the Italian Mafia died away in the 70s. I think they're real strong right here in Dallas, Texas. And you also, you know, Jimmy Hoffa was supposed to be I guess one of the major don of the Irish mob, and he disappears in 1975. Now President Kennedy and Robert Kennedy were both assassinated, and they say it most definitely has to do with the conflict with the mafia. Now, get me wrong, President Kennedy and Robert Kennedy were both Irish. You know, whether it's rumored, it hasn't been factual. Okay, it hasn't been factual. Brother Jimmy Hoffa had something to do with it. I forgot. That Robert Kennedy continuously coming after the mob had something to do with it. I don't know, but supposedly, you know, a lot of this has something to do with it. But I want to mention that the Irish The Italian Mafia was also in Dallas, Texas during that time period. There was a Dallas sect. Okay. So let's look at something else. Now we get to part 2. Now I'm bringing this up before I even get to the other side of the story, or the other side of the Iran country front. Let's look at the Roman Empire, Italy, Spain, Portugal, France, Egypt, most of Britain, Jerusalem, Greece, Syria, Armenia, Turkey, Istanbul. Of course, they would divide and begin to explore the world. Christopher Columbus was Italian, and others would begin to sail for Spain. The Spanish conquistadors, they would colonize the Caribbean islands, Florida, Mexico, Central America, the Aztec Indians, California, Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, etc. Bahamas, South America, Central America. They would replace some Indians in those locations with slaves, our African kings and queens from Africa, and in most locations start feeding them cocoa leaves. Is the Italian Spanish connection. British colonized most of the northern states and other parts of America, blah blah blah. Okay, I think I mentioned this. Okay, so I pretty much mentioned the Dallas first epidemic. Now let's go back to the I'm gonna read this part right here. Okay. Okay, the Jamaicans supposedly have a positive relationship with Iran. The Jamaicans began to sell crack in Dallas, Texas. Black Afro-American communities, and they bring Uzis with them. Israel makes Uzis, and a few other countries that had Uzis at the time were the U.S. Secret Service, the Irish, Germany, Belgium, Rhodesia, Netherlands, Sri Lanka, etc. And what I'm thinking, no, those are all allies. These countries that I mentioned are against what we call the old or modern day Roman Empire. The Afro immigrants are coming to America. Now, why do I call it the other side of Iran Contra firm? Now, one thing I forgot to mention about the Italians, and this once again is go back to, Italian, Spanish are considered, in blood relations or race relations like cousins. The Italians have casinos in Cuba. They go to Cuba. They got all these casinos. So they got a strong connection to Cuba. But when Fidel Castro becomes president, he cuts out all of that. He cuts out the casinos. He cut out all American relations. Okay, so he cut out all American relations. Now, if I'm looking at the history of drugs in Dallas, Texas, now there's many theories. One theory is that we had a connection to New York. One connection. Which is logical that Kenneth Supreme McGriff might have relatives in Dallas, Texas. Of course, we know Bumpy Johnson, Frank Lucas, and etc. Okay, another rumor, and of course we have Freeway Ricky Ross. We have I heard this name. Brian Waterhead Bo Bennett. Okay, so those two majors from LA. Now before that is Tootie Reese. I'm gonna bring up Tootie Reese when I get to part 4, The Big Secret, because Tootie Reese is very important. He started before everyone, most of them in the 50s and 60s, and then of course you had the Detroit connection. And supposedly they had a French connection, which I'm just pretty much saying it was Now that, it's all Italian, Spain, Spanish, whatever. There's no French. I'm saying it's a Roman Empire connection. Modern day Roman Empire connection. And then they end up going to New York. I'm talking about African Americans connections right here in Dallas, Texas. So you have Young Boys Incorporated eventually. Now I had a person tell me that right here in Dallas, Texas, that he used to go to Miami, and he had a connection from a Cuban in Miami, which is logical. Now, one thing I want to say about Dallas, Texas, is we most definitely have a lot of Mexicans from Mexico. I'm just going to say that. Not to be offensive. Some people prefer to be called Hispanic, some Latinos, but I have some peers that prefer to be called Mexican. Why am I bringing this up? Because, I need to research this. Because once again, Mexico got their freedom from Spain. Okay, so we're talking about the Cuban-Mexican connection. Because in Dallas history, now a few people may say that we have had Cubans here, but it's not like a Miami per se, or having Haitians. We have Jamaicans, and we have we got the Italians, we got the Irish, the Swiss, Germans, etc. And we have of course we got Colombians, but once again, that's all Spanish. So you got Mexico, you got Spanish, etc. But when I get to the other side of Iran Contra, for number one, Oliver North sent weaponry to Iran. The conflict between Iran, and I'm gonna get a little bit more deeper when I get into part 4, the big secret. To make a long story short, the Jamaicans have a connection with Iran, and they came to North Texas with Uzis. The only way they could have gotten those Uzis was either from Iran or the Irish. Now, in the Irish mob, the gentleman mentioned going to Colombia, and he mentioned going to Jamaica. So the Jamaicans have a connection with the Irish, and they also have a connection with Iran. So, once again, SR Tallie hypothesis, they have Uzis. The other side of Iran Contra, for, as they said in the article of the Texas Monthly that came out in 1988, they have Uzis. Now, so once again, I talked about the possible connections that Dallas, Texas may have, and also, of course, with St. Louis and other districts. But what I'm thinking though, Detroit, being that they're connected directly to Detroit, Michigan, actually, the city of Detroit actually borders Canada. There has to be a point of interest for anyone, doing that. We know Canadian border, Canada borders us from the East Coast to the West Coast. Okay, but I'm looking at a major point of entry from the Midwest. You got Jimmy Hoffa. So Detroit is funnily, in my opinion, one of the main interests for the Irish Mafia. But once again, I'm looking at Spain and Italy. So, as I mentioned, a lot of people say, well, Ronald Reagan, me saying that Ronald Reagan is Irish, or President Bush is Irish, is offensive. I want you to go back to the colonization of America. You know, I want you to go back to the colonization of America and the conflict. You know, but we're gonna, you know, once again, Mexico, as it says on the CIA World Fact Book, is now a producer for methamphetamine, for heroin, and cannabis. A producer. So, you know, but, you know, I'm looking at the cartels of Mexico. And I'm going to discuss this a little bit more in part 4. You know, because, you know, once again, it goes back to the motherland of Spain and Italy. You know, are all the cartels working for Mexico? Or some of the cartels working for the Italians? You know, are they all, because you got the Golden Crescent and the Golden Triangle producing opium. Okay? Now we know opium can be a little bit, you know, spread out a little bit more. So we really have to look at that. Okay. Now, I know there's a lot of other countries involved, but I'm not trying to, you know. Then you got the You got to look at the religion. You got the Muslim countries. You know, Muslims helping other Muslims. You know, so really the other side of the Iran country for is really about the come up of the Afro immigrant. It's about the Afro immigrant. And once again, I will get into more details when I get into the big secret. It's about the Afro immigrant. Now let me check my notes to make sure that I'm not leaving out anything important. Because you know, in Dallas, you know, we got them Aztecs down here. You know, even though, if I'm not mistaken, we had the Comanche Indians, and I forgot the other sect of Indians that we had in Dallas, Texas, before Dallas, Texas was colonized. But just a second. Now, as I mentioned, now when I watched El Chapo documentary on Netflix, I know they're telling his life story. You know, he was also pushing cocaine to when he got to connect. They said he got to connect with Pablo Escobar. So Pablo Escobar. So El Chapo is really working with the Spanish, you know, and his cartel is working with Pablo Escobar. And once again, part of South America was discovered by the Portuguese. Now, Peru used to be the #1 producer of cocoa leaves, or they can say cocaine. I don't think it's the #1 producer anymore. It might be Colombia, Bolivia. It might be, I think it's Afghanistan. No, I take that back. It has to be one of, it either has to be, I think it's Colombia now. But Peru used to be the #1 producer. You know, but I'm quite sure within that region, cocoa leaves can stay long enough to produce cocaine. Now we know we had the project in Nicaragua, and this is what all this Iran Contra is all about in Nicaragua. You know, the conflict, the Iran Contra has 3 main countries in it. Several countries. It has Iran, it has Cuba, it has the Soviet Union, it has Nicaragua, and it has most definitely Colombia. So, you know, the U.S. government, and I want to talk about this part too much, because I'm going to talk a lot more when I discuss the big secret, part 4. You know, the Iran Contra supposedly includes, you know, free ray Rick Ross, in which they're trying to explain in Snowfalls. Okay, includes Rick Ross. Once again, Rick Ross might have a connection in Dallas, Texas. They're saying, Waterhead Bo, who had a connection with the Cali cartel in California, has a connection in Dallas. You have Cali cartel in New York. You have Cali cartel in Miami, Houston, California. New York, Houston. Pablo Escobar main area was Miami, but they all supposedly had been partners, and their other partner had parts of Mexico. So what I'm looking at when I look at looking at Mexico being a producer, are they a producer for Mexico, or as far as they pretty much cutting out cocaine and pushing. They're pushing. Now that I look at it, they're pushing methamphetamine. They're pushing heroin, and they're pushing cannabis. And I'm gonna say, for the most part, I think they're going against the Italian-Spanish connection. Because once again, the Italian-Spanish conquered all those Caribbean islands. Florida, Bahamas. You got Spanish descent. The whites in those countries have Spanish descent. So that's a war. And then you got the Irish and their connections. As I mentioned, a lot of this that's going on today is all about drugs, money, and the mafia, and most definitely race relations. But now you have the rise of the Afro immigrant, and that's pretty much what we're going to be talking about in part 4, The Big Secret. You have the African immigrant, and there is a big secret. And we sort of discussed another part of the Iranians giving Jamaicans Uzis that they got from America. The Jamaicans, once again had a major part in the crack epidemic, especially here in Dallas, Texas. I cannot speak for other countries or whatever, but especially here in Dallas, Texas. But as I mentioned, we have Dallas possibly have connections in California, Detroit, St. Louis, and most definitely New York. But I'm gonna say I'm looking most definitely looking at Kenneth Supreme McGriff. But we have some old heads here that might have had other connections, and most definitely I have a consultant who pretty much said that they had to drive to Miami. They had a connection with a Cuban in Miami. But once again, when I get to the part 4 of The Big Secret, then we'll go into that. And that's pretty much it that I want to discuss today. I hope I didn't forget anything. But so when we look at the cartels, and what I'm saying is the Italians might be a little bit more powerful than what I envision. Okay, so once again, the Italians had a conflict with a newly elected president in the 1800s, and that's why a lot of mobsters came to America. Now, of course, we've heard about the Al Capones and the gangs of New York and etc. All the men in the mafia. But when I get to The Big Secret, it will gain more clarity. So I just want to just go over a few more corrections. So this is part 3B of SR Tallie Hypothesis, the other side of the Iran Contra. Thank you.